coup initiated by the military regime in Athens and brought Mr. Sampson to power had heralded a new era of terrorism, massacres, and anarchy or chaos on the island, and we were sure that that would be the end of the independent state of Cyprus, a de facto enosis, even if the name were not to be uttered, and new massacres against the Turkish people. So we felt that if we didn't act in time, everything would have been lost, not only the freedom and safety of the Turks, but the whole state of Cyprus. So we had to do something about it immediately. But we didn't want to resort to military action. That's the reason why I went to Britain immediately after the coup. That is, I went there on the 17th and talked with Mr. Wilson, Mr. Callaghan and their colleagues and inquired if we could do something together as to guarantor powers. Unfortunately, I couldn't receive a positive reply, and we didn't have any time to lose, so we acted.
Were you bitter about the response you got in London from Mr. Wilson and Mr. Callaghan that they could not do anything?
No, I had no right to be bitter. Of course, they had to make their own decision, but I thought that there would have been a greater chance, there might have been a greater chance of finding a more peaceful solution to the immediate issue before us, if we could have acted jointly.
Whatever the justification of the original landing, you in Turkey lost a lot of world sympathy with the breakdown of the Geneva Conference. There you were negotiating, but you issued an ultimatum. You were asked for just 36 hours to consider it. A question of peace or war, and you would not give it. You went back to war.
Yes.
What remote justification was there for not giving the 36 hours?
Well, we had several reasons and justifications. One is that even in the beginning of this second round of Geneva talks, we had told the British, Greece, and the island Greeks about our suggestions. It wasn't something new that they learned on the sixth day of the conference. And it was obvious that our proposal would not be acceptable to the Greeks. We were also sure that they were trying to gain time, because after the change of regime in Athens, which we really welcome in Turkey, the Greek government had become aware that they were quickly regaining prestige in the international world, and they thought that if they had time, they could give the things the direction they wished in the diplomatic field. And another factor, there was a very serious case of security for the Turkish units. You know, large units were squeezed in a very small part of the island, and they were exposed to all sorts of dangers.
But you had complete military predominance.
Yes, but squeezed and almost imprisoned to a small area. They weren't being effective to secure the safety of the Turks elsewhere, and they could not even undertake their own security because they were exposed to all sorts of dangers within a small area surrounded by Greek forces.
But Prime Minister, 36 hours is 36 hours, and it's difficult to believe that that short period would have totally changed the military scene. It does look, to many outsiders, as if you'd always intended to take a stage two and to take what you wanted by force, which is in fact what you did.
Yes, but it was a matter of taking risks. We felt that we had taken all the risks we could regarding the security of the Turkish troops on the island by waiting so many days after the first Geneva talks. And there were several indications that the Greeks were after gaining time, after delaying tactics.
Minister, how do you look at Greece? Greece, during this crisis, has had a change of government, but it's in a position now, since you have the military power on the island, where it would be almost too humiliating for Greece to just give in to you. How do you look at the Greek position?
Well, if they looked at their foreign problems, international problems, in a realistic way, they shouldn't have a feeling of defeat. But unfortunately, they don't look at these matters in a realistic from a realistic and contemporary angle. I have repeatedly said recently that they cherish these memories of the old Byzantine history. They have their what they call ideals of Hellenism, of material or spiritual enosis, and so forth. Now, any nation in the world who cherished such dreams of past historic glory would not find rest in the present-day world. I gave the example the other day. Suppose Turkey, which has had a much more recent history of an empire, had similar dreams of annexing the old territories. Where would Turkey have ended today? We would have been on very bad terms with all our neighbors. Suppose, take Britain. Suppose the British wanted to revive, to restore their empire. Where would they have ended in the present-day world? I think that if the Greeks realize the necessities of the age we are all living in, and appreciate that this is not the age of restoring empires, but this is the age where all empires have to end, are ending, then they could come to terms with our present-day world, with the realities of the region, and they could accommodate themselves to friendship with Turkey. After all, Mr. Mavros himself said recently that Greece and Turkey are condemned to live in friendship.
I can't ask you to negotiate in public, but are you prepared to say that Turkey is prepared to give up part of the territory it now holds as part of a settlement?
Well, I have said several times that the demarcation of the Turkish Cypriot control area is negotiable within reasonable bounds. It's obvious what I mean by this, but I use the term negotiable. So we should first start negotiating, and we will put this matter on the table. That's all that I can say. And I have also said that if sufficient security measures, particularly for the Turks living outside the Turkish-controlled area, are taken, which is that they should be allowed to migrate to the Turkish-controlled area if they wish. Once this is secured, we could start the phased reduction of the Turkish forces on the island, even without waiting for the start of the negotiations.
Looking at Cyprus now, Prime Minister, there's no doubt that the areas that your troops have taken are economically the best bits of Cyprus, and they've taken them so firmly that you do have virtually effective partition. Is this a fair comment, that the rest of Cyprus that is left, Greek Cyprus, is virtually impossible to run as a viable economy?
Well, I don't think so. After all, they can still have industry and touristic industries flourish.
But you have Famagusta and Kyrenia, which are the two main places.
Yes, but this was not done for economic purposes, but that was the most convenient part of the island to have under our control geographically, considering Turkey's proximity to that part of the land.
But I repeat, it is economically the heartland of the country.
Yes, so it seems. But after all, for a long time, the Turks suffered very heavily from economic oppression, and many Turks had to migrate to small enclaves, were even unable to till their own land. Now, what we have to do is to run, the Turkish community in the island, the Turkish administration should run the part they control very efficiently. And we don't intend to partition the island. We hope that there will be a federal structure. So, in a sense, it will be the wealth, it will be the commonwealth of the island. We have already started taking measures to save the crops and the cattle. I know how the British are sensitive on it. I have been listening to the British Broadcasting Corporation's broadcasts. And I believe that we shall be able to save the orchards, the citrus, the orange, etc. and to start the touristic installations in places like Famagusten, Kyrenia operate again.
But what about the people? There's a very, very large number of Greek Cypriots have moved out of those areas, those rich areas, and are now refugees. Do you believe that they can feel secure enough, you can make them feel secure enough, that they would wish to come back and live inside the Turkish sector?
Well, obviously, they feel they will be very secure in the Turkish area, so that they want to return there. But on the other hand, we are faced with open threats from the Greeks that they intend to start guerrilla activities in the Turkish-controlled area. This is not sufficient encouragement for us to invite back all the Greeks that have migrated from the now Turkish-controlled zone.
What happens to the rest then?
Well, you see, it's a complex problem. Whereas the Greeks in the Turkish-controlled area obviously feel secure about their lives and properties, the Turks remaining in the Greek-controlled area do not feel secure. Most of them are still held as hostages. They can't return to their enclaves, to their lands. We believe that they should be given the chance of a safe passage to the Turkish-controlled area if they wish to do so. So we need room for these Turks in the Turkish-controlled area.
Which means there won't be room for the Greeks.
Well, we don't know how much room there will be left for the Greeks to return. This should be one of the primary issues that should be discussed around the negotiating table, either with the participation of the guarantor powers or among the two community leadership.
Minister, you and Turkey were offended by the remarks of Mr. Callaghan after the Geneva conference that your army might well become a prisoner of Cyprus. Is there not a danger that you will get drawn deeper and deeper into Cyprus, particularly if terrorism and guerrilla war start there?
Well, you should allow me to consider Mr. Callaghan's remarks as a warning, in the light of which we must take precautionary measures. That is, to prevent the possibilities of Greek terrorism emerging in the Turkish-controlled area. That should be one of our primary concerns. If most of the Turks, those Turks who wish to do so, settle in the Turkish-controlled area, and vice versa, there may be exceptions, of course, and we will never ask those Greeks who have remained in the Turkish-controlled zone to leave the zone. But if this will be the general pattern, there will be no danger of terrorism. And again, if you allow me to say so, the British position in the 50s was entirely different. You see, Britain was inevitably considered as an outsider, whereas the Turks on the island are not outsiders. It's their land also, and what they want to do is to live more safely and freely in their own motherland. So the situations are very different. And let me say, without sounding aggressive, that I don't think we will let terrorism emerge in the Turkish control.